recommendations before. After that, we are going to be actually receiving a presentation from Ms. Esther Maluleke, the Chief Director of Social Empowerment of Women from the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities. She will be presenting the opportunities and constraints for gender missionaries, a reflection of progress over the past 5 years. After that, we are going to then open discussions from the room and also from our stakeholders online so that the engagement can be interactive as much as possible. As a way forward, that item is going to be delivered by the CGE CEO, Dr. Dennis Matotoka, and the last item in the program will be the closure that is going to be done by Mr. Rabu Relitsimo, the manager in the CEO's office. And then after that, we will then depart for lunch. So this is the program for the day, colleagues, that we are going to be following, and I would really like to urge our speakers to keep to the time. We are already 10 minutes late, and I hope that we will be able to cover that lost time. And from that, colleagues, I would like to call upon the stage Mr. Sila Moligwa to do the opening and welcoming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Ms. Pilisiwe Kabela. Good morning, colleagues who are in the boardroom and those who are joining us online. As it has been said, my name is Sila Moligwa. I am the Communications Manager at the Commission for Gender Equality. My task is to officially open and welcome everyone who is joining us today in this policy dialogue. On the established protocols that have been mentioned, I would like to start by acknowledging the chairperson of the Commission for Gender Equality, Advocate Ntabiseng Sepanyamuhale, and also acknowledge the commissioners who are joining us online, and acknowledge the presence of the CEO as well, Dr. Dennis Matotoka, all the heads of departments and managers of the Commission for Gender Equality. I would like to also welcome the employees and everyone who is part of the CGE community who is joining us today, and also extend a warm welcome to our guests who are joining us online through our various social media platforms. We are live on Facebook, we are live on Instagram, and we are live on YouTube. Everyone who is joining us on those platforms, thank you very much for taking this time to be with us, and you are most welcome to this engagement today. The program director has mentioned the research study that has brought us to this, so I'm not going to repeat that, but we are definitely looking forward to your participation and your active engagement as we discuss the recommendations and the findings of the study that has been referred to. Our theme for this policy dialogue is the effectiveness of gender focal persons in South Africa, and I am very much certain that we are going to learn a lot from the presentation that is going to be delivered by our CGE researchers, and we look forward to all the engagements that will follow the presentation. Thank you very much. The policy dialogue is hereby open. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moligwa. Colleagues, can we just put our hands together for Silo? The beauty about having technology is that you can still clap your hands and blow your own horn even virtually. So we really want to see that same level of encouragement from our online stakeholders, that when we put together our hands, you're more than welcome to also put together your hands virtually. Colleagues, without wasting much time, then we are now going to be moving to calling up on the stage Ms. Naledi to actually take us through the purpose of the day. Over to you, Naledi.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning, colleagues. All protocols observed. As introduced, I'm Naledi Selebano. In 2013, the Commission for Gender Equality conducted a study to assess the impact of gender focal persons or points in integrating the constitutional imperative of gender equality in public service. The study resulted in a report titled Assessing the Effectiveness of Gender Focal Points in South Africa. This initiative was in line with the CGE mandate, which involves monitoring the efforts of both public and private institutions in promoting gender equality in the country. The study covered a wide array of national and provincial departments to determine the effectiveness of gender focal points. And as part of this project, several recommendations were made by the CGE, which in 2022-23 financial year, the CGE followed up on. It had been just under a decade since the study was published, and therefore as the CGE, we deemed it sufficient time for institutions to have addressed key findings and recommendations emanating from the 2013 report. The 2022-23 study also included national and provincial government departments, but we also went on to include GFPs in local government. It is important at this point to also reflect on the fact that this event is not the first of its kind, as upon the completion of the 2013 report, the CGE undertook a series of policy dialogues to discuss issues emerging from it with relevant stakeholders at national as well as in the provinces. The CGE also released a policy brief titled Turning Events Managers into Gender Focal Points, which was a metaphor used to describe the situation whereby GFPs were responsible for running calendar events and not so much concerned with critical areas of gender mainstreaming in public service. We understand that gender focal points are crucial for integrating a gender equality perspective across all levels of policies, programs, and projects. However, the implementation of these measures to ensure equal access to resources, opportunities, and fair treatment for the purpose of achieving equitable, participatory, and sustainable development has not been as swift as has been anticipated. Women and queer persons have often been overlooked by development planners and policymakers, leading to widespread gender inequality. Challenges such as the poor implementation of gender-sensitive budgeting, sexual harassment, sex for jobs and promotions, unbalanced work-life policies and practices, gender stereotyping, bias against mothers, and the fluctuant levels of representation at leadership positions still persist. I'll make an example of our senior management service, or SMS, in the public sector. The level of women's representation decreased from 48.7% in 2021 to 44% in 2022, highlighting challenges in achieving the national target of 50% at this level. Factors contributing to these challenges include poor planning and coordination, inadequate program costing, inefficient resource allocation, and ineffective implementation of government policies, legislation, plans, and programs, all of which are issues that should be championed by GFPs in their work. We also note that these challenges are not new. They have been known to us for some time. As in 2011, the CEDAW Committee, in its concluding observations, noted that the country's national gender machinery had significant institutional weaknesses, including a lack of appropriate skills and inadequate training for state personnel. The committee specifically urged the state party to provide the national machinery with sufficient human, financial, and technical resources to coordinate the implementation of the convention, as well as to effectively promote gender equality. It also called on the state party to strengthen the connections between national, provincial, and local levels in as far as gender equality activities are concerned, including by providing training in gender sensitization and gender mainstreaming. Well, nonetheless, colleagues, the CGE is hosting this policy dialogue to promote evidence-informed policy making through discussion of key issues and evidence emerging from the findings and recommendations of one of its reports. And as already been mentioned, today's specific focus is on the report titled assessing the effectiveness of gender focal persons in South Africa, and we are specifically looking into government's response to CGE findings and recommendations. This initiative aims to develop policy and programming actions in collaboration with stakeholders and to improve accountability mechanisms. This report is part of the CGE program on follow-up reviews. Through this program, we evaluate the implementation of our recommendations over the years. And because this report falls under this program, we will therefore be seeking high-level accountability, a high level of accountability in this session, to understand why the CGE recommendations have not been effectively implemented. We requested the participation of senior officials for this very reason. And for those departments that did not honor our invitation, we will make strict follow-ups to seek explanation in terms of why they are not cooperating with us. We are a Chapter 9 institution with a constitutional mandate. We also have watchdog powers. So we expect that departments cooperate and attend when we call upon them to do so. In addition, we will seek a commitment to action, which is necessary. And as the CGE, we will continue to monitor and track developments in this area. With that, Program Director, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Silbano. Colleagues, can we just put our hands together for Naledi? I'm sure if you were wondering if you are attending the right meeting, given what she has actually presented to us right now, you can all agree that we are indeed in the correct, or rather in the right meeting. Colleagues, without wasting much time, I'm going to be then calling upon Liandi to actually come forward and give us provincial observations of the work that CGE has been doing over the years in the NGMs that are found in the provinces. And Liandi will be joining us virtually. So Liandi, please take on the floor. Thank you.
Established with other Chapter 9 institutions under Section 181 of the Constitution of South Africa. In terms of Section 187 of the Constitution, the Commission is mandated to promote and protect gender equality in government, civil society, and the private sector. To this end, the Commission for Gender Equality Act, as amended, gives the Commission the power to monitor and evaluate policies and practices of organs of state at any level, statutory bodies and functionaries, public bodies and authorities and private businesses, enterprises and institutions to promote gender equality and make any recommendations that the Commission deems necessary. Briefly, the three programmatic departments for the Commission are namely the Legal Department, the Public Education and Information Department, and the Research and Policy Department, that each acts within their activities to further the mandate of the CGE. What is gender mainstreaming? Gender mainstreaming is an approach to policy making that takes into account both women's and men's interests and concerns. The concept of gender mainstreaming was first introduced in the 1985 Nairobi World Conference on Women, and it was established as a strategy in international gender equality policy through the Beijing Platform for Action, as adopted at the 1995 Fourth United Nations World Conference on Women in Beijing. Gender mainstreaming is centered around integrating a gender equality perspective at all stages and levels of policies, programs, and projects. Women and men have different needs, living conditions, and circumstances, including unequal access to and control over power, resources, human rights, and institutions, including the justice system. And the aim of gender mainstreaming is to consider these differences when designing, implementing, and evaluating policies, programs, and projects, so that they benefit both women and men and do not increase inequality but enhance gender equality. Gender mainstreaming aims to solve the sometimes hidden gender inequalities. Gender focal persons form part of the national gender machinery, and this is the mechanisms for transforming gender relations in South Africa, which is collectively known within government and civil society as the national gender machinery. Gender focal persons or points are strategic units within public service responsible for the implementation of gender mainstreaming and form part of the national gender machinery. In terms of the national framework on women's empowerment and gender equality, the functions of gender focal persons or points are as follows: to ensure the implementation of the national gender policy, ensuring that gender issues are routinely considered in departmental strategic planning exercises, ensuring that departments reflect gender considerations in their business plans and routinely report on them, reviewing departmental policy and planning in line with the national gender policy framework, as well as reviewing all policies, projects, and programs for their gender implications, ensuring that departments provide and use gender disaggregated data in their work, to establish mechanisms to link and liaise with civil society, to coordinate gender training and education of all staff within departments, to ensure that gender is integrated into all aspects of work, to monitor and evaluate departmental projects and programs, to assess whether they are consistent with the national gender policy. The national gender policy highlights that gender focal persons or points should be located in the office of the Director General. The Director General in each department is the Chief Accounting Officer and therefore responsible for all departmental functions. This placement of gender focal persons or points within the office of the DG will give the unit access to all departmental policies and programs, thereby creating an enabling environment for gender mainstreaming. The challenges that we've observed provincially with regards to gender focal persons or points are that gender focal persons are meant to drive gender mainstreaming within all spheres of governance, but there have been numerous challenges faced by the unit in fulfilling its mandate. In many instances, gender focal persons are special programs officers, which include a multifaceted role with responsibilities for children, youth, disability, HIV/AIDS, and therefore gender focal persons are responsible for arranging and organizing activities around National Women's Day and 16 days of activism, while never engaging the policies and substantive programs of their respective departments or local municipalities. Gender focal persons are often working alone or with very little resources and minimal support, which places an additional strain on the fulfillment of their mandate. Gender is not actively being mainstreamed in departments and local municipalities, but it's rather seen as a standalone issue to be dealt with in an ad hoc basis when and needed. Managers and senior officials are often not familiar with gender issues and how they impact policies and program initiatives, and gender focal persons are not regarded as experts in this area. The level of gender focal persons is often too low within the structure of public service to be effective in driving gender mainstreaming. In local government, gender focal persons are appointed in the office of the executive mayor, and the term of their office is often linked to that of the executive mayor. So when the executive mayor leaves, often the gender focal person also leaves. There's also no standard qualification requirement for gender focal persons within public service, which can create a barrier in terms of appointing gender focal persons. There's a lack of support for the position and the role of gender focal persons by senior management, which results in compromising the work of that gender focal persons are responsible for. There's generally a lack of understanding from both gender focal persons and staff, including senior management, regarding the functions and the responsibilities of gender focal persons within public service. Gender focal persons or the units or points are usually underfunded, and if they have budget allocated to their office, it's often shifted to core departmental units, as mainstreaming and gender focal points are not deemed as important. They are also not included in the strategic transformation processes of departments such as policy making, recruitment and selection, skills development, and procurement committees, which makes it difficult to engender these processes. In conclusion, these challenges generate a fundamental misunderstanding of the importance of gender focal points and their functions within public service. They hamper the operations of gender focal persons and relegates the office to organizing special events and projects while neglecting the intention of the establishment of the office. Driving mainstreaming requires the cooperation of the accounting officers and all senior managers, as well as a full understanding of the gender focal points office and responsibilities in the work of gender mainstreaming. Thank you, Program Director.
A very concerning issue in provinces where you are indicating that gender focal persons in the public service are not strategically placed as limiting value add and limiting the sought transformation of policymaking. I think this is a very critical or rather concerning observation that we are seeing coming out of the provincial work that we are doing. It just makes me think, based on a quote that I once came across with by the former Secretary General of the UN Nations, of reducing poverty, promoting sustainable development, and building good governance. I close quote. So if you are giving these observations from the provinces where we clearly see that there's lack of strategic placement, lack of resources, limited view of how gender focal persons are supposed to be doing, then what is government doing? But without taking much time, colleagues, I really want us to think as stakeholders who are in this room in terms of, are we really transforming gender equality in decisions and in our daily work? This is just a homework, something to ponder on. As we move along, colleagues, I'm going to then be calling upon our researchers to take us through the report presentation on the study that CGE has commissioned. And we're going to be receiving that presentation from Tabani Longwa and Hunse Mutaung. They will be co-presenting. Ladies and gentlemen, can we just put our hands together for our colleagues who will be giving us the report? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Program Director. Chairperson of the CGE, Advocate Ntabiseng Sepanyamogale, CEO Dr. Matutoka, colleagues, esteemed colleagues, and all esteemed guests, I greet you. My name is Khonse Motau. I am with my colleague Tabani Mdlongwa. We will be presenting to you the report that we did in the financial year 2022-2023. So imagine a house that is quite effective, that has all the structures in place. And in that house, there is this dedicated system that is supposed to be making sure that all the systems in the house run efficiently, that make sure that everybody has food, that make sure that everybody knows where to be, when to be, how to be, what to do. Imagine such a house. That house in this moment will be referred to as the GFPs, gender focal persons, who would make a system, especially one that is in the public sector and the private sector, very efficient and make it easier for gender mainstreaming to find effect, and also for gender equality to find easy to be attained easily. So that is the backdrop of where we will be taking our study from today. Colleagues, in 2022-2023, the CGE conducted a study titled Assessing the Effectiveness of Gender Focal Points or Persons in South Africa, which I'll continuously refer to as GFPs, where we were assessing government's responses to CGE findings and recommendations of 2013. This study was a follow-up study from the backdrop of a study that was conducted in 2013. After a decade, the CGE then decided that, you know what, we want to go back and double-check what has been done in this decade since this study has been done. And in the backdrop of all of the studies that the CGE always conducts is the mandate of the CGE, because all the studies are meant to fulfill the mandate of the CGE, which is highlighted in the South African Constitution. And the mandate of the CGE is provided for in Section 187 of the Constitution of South Africa and in the CGE Act of 1996 as amended. And the mandate is quite clear and very interesting for me. The CGE mandate is to promote respect for and to protect, develop and attain gender equality, and to make a recommendation on any legislation affecting the status of women. Also, as the section states, the Commission for Gender Equality must promote respect for gender equality, which includes but is not limited to politics and participation of women in leadership. And also, I should highlight, as we are constantly highlighting and looking at the transformation in gender, the mandate of the CG is not only confined within this aspect as we're changing. Hence, we keep on referring to as amended, because it covers a lot of, over the years, we've seen the transformation of the gender space and everything else. The mandate covers everything inclusive of vulnerable groups such as the members of the LGBTQI+, persons with disabilities, and everything that falls, and everyone that falls within the spectrum of gender. And under Section 187, the CG has its powers that are granted as a regulated by national legislation necessary to perform its function, including the power to monitor, investigate, research, educate, lobby, advise, report on issues concerning gender equality. I should highlight, most of the times when we make such presentation, people will say, no, we're the Commission for Women. We're not the Commission for Women. We're the Commission for Gender Equality, and we want to attain gender equality in our lifetime. In the backdrop of the mandate, as highlighted, a study was conducted in 2013, as my colleagues have been highlighting. The study was also titled Assessing the Effectiveness of Gender Focal Points in South Africa. And because of this was a follow-up study, the focus was mostly on the findings that were found at that time, and also the recommendation that the CGE recommended. Just to highlight a few findings from that study, just to provide a bit of a background. It was found that GFPs are generally appointed in lower ranks of the public services, and which is in direct contradiction to the prescripts of the National Gender Policy Framework, which is famously known in the NGPF, which calls for GFPs to be appointed at all at the level of a director or upwards. Already from this finding, you can deduce a lot. One, if they are not appointed at a director level, it already tells you of the level of influence that GFPs have within that, which is close to nothing, because they hold no power to make anything, because power within public and private sectors is mostly where decisions are made, which is from directorship and going upwards. And also what was found is that GFPs are generally located in units that are responsible for and are burdened with performing functions unrelated to gender mainstreaming. In the previous studies, it was found, and I should highlight, even in this one, and my colleague will take you to the findings, that in most cases you find that they're overburdened with issues of events that are not even related to gender issues or even gender mainstreaming, to a certain degree that some do not even exist. Some have reasonable in inverted commas, reasonable alternatives, but when you check the reasonable alternative, it's just the blend or the name. They do not really seem to be looking at what they are supposed to be meant for as GFPs. Also, it was highlighted that government institutions are still reluctant to establish fully dedicated gender mainstreaming units. As a result, many of these institutions do not make provision for the development of the necessary skills and training in this regard. Can move to the next slide. Also, it was highlighted that GFPs and gender mainstreaming units of government departments are unlikely to have dedicated budget allocations. This is a serious one. To attain gender equality, it only makes sense that you budget for it. And for budget to be fully effective, it needs somebody to manage it. And in the previous study, it was found that actually there is no special allocated budget, not only from these, but the issue or the notion always comes in that it's the ranking of where the budget comes from that does not allow for this, which makes it a lot hard for us to attain gender equality if it is not budgeted for. And also, GFPs are widely perceived as effective in coordination or liaison activities and managing events as highlighted and relating to gender mainstreaming, although they are perceived as ineffective in participating in and influencing departmental decisions affecting these areas. Imagine the system that I spoke about, a system that is supposed to run the household, making sure that everything is in check, but the same system is disempowered. The same system cannot run the household. It is definitely not going to be effective in what it does. And also, driven by the 2013 report, the CGE recommended the following. One, we can move to the next slide slowly. Sorry about that. The CGE pointed out that it was absolutely necessary for senior management in government to be thoroughly familiar with the general content of the NGPF, as well as the specific provisions relating to the work, status, level of appointment or rank, competencies, functions, locations, and other crucial aspects of the post of GFPs. This was a serious recommendation. It was highlighted as I highlighted in the findings that there seems to be lack of understanding of, especially when it comes to the appointment of GFPs, and understanding what is the level of appointment, what is the rank, what are the functions that they're supposed to be doing, and all that. Remember the point that I spoke about, that system, if it is not understood, it will not be properly placed. Also, the CGE recommended that government, departments, local authorities, and other institutions of government with positions of GFPs already in place undertake a thorough review and evaluation of the post and its related responsibility to determine the scope and responsibilities necessary to ensure effective gender mainstreaming. The backdrop of this is that not everything was bad in the findings. There were areas where we found that there were gender focal points. However, It is the functions that have never been clear. So hence this was part of the recommendation. Also, it was recommended that institutions develop effective internal strategies for ensuring effective allocation of financial budgetary resources for the work of gender mainstreaming in government. Can move to the next slide. Also, it was recommended that government departments, local authorities, and other relevant institutions where this practice is currently taking place should desist from either assigning to GFPs additional functions and responsibilities and unrelated to gender mainstreaming, unless it has been determined that such an arrangement is consistent with the best practice to promote gender mainstreaming and gender equality in government. The issues around gender equality are broad, and there are a lot. We cannot exhaust them. That is why GFPs cannot be overburdened with any other issues. What is mostly for example, you'd find that in other institutions, you find that GFPs are also dealing with issues around persons with disabilities. That area on its own is overloaded and has a lot. And also it has an aspect of gender in it, which the GFP can also look into as a scope, not necessarily looking at events and managing the events and everything that is happening there. And lastly, many government departments at a national and provincial level and local authorities, either without the post of a GFP or a reasonable alternative structure, must perform the function. It was also therefore recommended that Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, together with the CGE, initiate public hearings at which all state or public institutions that have failed to create the position of GFP must come and highlight what has been the case and then how are they going to move in to fixing the issue. Moving to the research problem. Every study is guided by research problems, and with this one, mostly I should highlight, it was also highlighted and guided by the research, similar research problems that the previous study was has named. Also, you'll see when my co-presenter goes into the findings why the research problems were almost similar, because in most cases not much was done. So it is highly crucial to also go back and see what could have been the problem. Firstly, GFPs are generally appointed in the lower ranks of the public service. I've stressed this enough, which is in direct contradiction of the prescripts of the NGPF, which calls for the post to be appointed at the level of director of upwards. I mean, if you want to influence gender or have a positive influence on whatsoever, decision making is very important. And how is it that then you'll be able to be influential if you are appointed at the rank? Hence, the NGPF was very quite clear on this level of appointment of how it should happen. Secondly, GFPs are generally located in units that are responsible for and burdened with performing functions unrelated to gender mainstreaming, thus creating a greater likelihood that gender mainstreaming would be marginalized or struggle for limited. As highlighted, gender issues are a lot. Gender on its own, it's a huge study that needs to be covered. So in this instance, it is very important that it is not, GFPs are not overburdened so that they are able to actually effectively cover the mandate of what is required within the prescripts of a gender focal person or gender focal point. Thirdly, government institutions were still reluctant to establish fully dedicated gender mainstreaming units or appoint GFPs with clearly defined roles. As a result, many of these institutions do not make provision for development of the necessary skills. I mean, like I said, if the system is there, it is supposed to perform a certain role, but it is not understood. Obviously, it is not going to be able to fully implement what it's supposed to do, because the functions are not quite clear. So it's quite important that we assess why is it that these functions are not clear. Is it because they are non-existent, or maybe the term gender mainstreaming, it's still also a bit unclear, and if it needs to be looked in. And lastly, the CGE undertook this study to actually try and address the similar problem that we found out in the previous years. Also, moving to the research objectives. The research objectives of the study were also similar to the ones in 2013 because of the challenges that we found also 10 years later. I need to emphasize the CGE did this follow-up study 10 years later, put it in the backdrop so that when you see the findings, you have a thorough understanding of how long public and private sector have been given to actually do this and what is it that we have found along those ones. So research objective number 1 was to determine the state of GFPs in government departments at national, provincial, and also local levels. And also there was to assess whether there is improvement in institutional capacity for GFPs to perform their functions. Also, we wanted to assess whether the effectiveness of GFPs in promoting gender equality and women's empowerment in government has been successful following the study conducted by the CGE in 2013. I should also highlight, it was not only surrounded at the questionnaire that we administered did not only focus on just the women. I'm just making emphasis that we holistically looked at a lot of things, especially within this as we looked at because of the nature of transformation that has happened over the years. And lastly, to determine the scope of work undertaken by GFPs apart from functions and responsibilities of gender mainstreaming. Moving into the methodology of the study. The study took a mixed method approach where we looked at both quantitative and qualitative data. And we had a questionnaire containing both closed and open-ended questions that was designed and it was sent to be self-administered by the departments. The reason for this is that in 2013, we learned in research, research is it's a continuous thing. We learned that we need to firstly assess what is there before we come in and question. Hence, we came up with this self-administered questionnaire. And it was from this self-administered questionnaire that we've then went in and did other interviews. The CGE research team wrote to 41. I also need to highlight this. We wrote to 41 national departments. 41 national departments. 9 provinces were also invited to be part of the study through the Office of the Premier. Where provinces had metros, they were also requested to participate. GFP units at local government levels are coordinated by the respective provincial heads through the Office of the Status of Women, and metros were reached through those offices. And the reason for this, one would argue, why so many? The reason for this is following up from the previous study. The research team included all the national, provincial, and local levels GFP unit to mitigate resistance and also not being able to get to a point where we saturate data because of in the past the response was quite low. So we wanted to have everybody else. It's best to fish from a bigger pool so that the data can look good, and then also it speaks to the broader perspective of things. I've also highlighted that we looked at mixed methods approach, and in the quantitative we looked at descriptive data in terms of numbers, graphs. We were asking numbers in terms of how many people are there, and then all of that spoke to this. And then qualitative, it's the questionnaire that we ran, this, where we also did in-depth interviews, and also we administered focus groups. And in terms of the sampling, we focused on purposive sampling. We had, why purposive? Because we did firstly run out a questionnaire where we wanted to see what was there. And from there, we had to sample who we are going to interview subject to the level of the responses. As highlighted, I did say underline 41 that were written to. And then now I'm taking to how many responded. Out of the 41, only 19 national officers responded to the questionnaire. Only 7 provinces and only 2 metros participated in the study. And mind you, from the 41, it is not all that we reached, but only 19 responded and filled up the study. And then they are highlighted in the table before that is highlighted them. So unfortunately, I'm not going to go through them, but they are in the report and also in the presentation. But we wanted to just highlight how hard it is because we have more than 2 metros in South Africa. But these were the only metros that were able to come up and speak to us on this. The limitations and the risks. These are the limitations and the risks that the research unit came up when we did this. One of the biggest issues was the unresponsiveness of government departments. And this is a critical one because even in the past. So from the 41, serious follow-ups also had to be made for us to get the 19 to get to respond. And also, even in that, the idea of the self-administered questionnaire was for us to find out what is there, probe, then after probing, then see if there's a need for us to come in and question and probe more. And the unfortunate part is that in other instances, government departmental were very reluctant or were not open to the idea of answering more than what was answered or opening our doors for us to come and research more. The other tough one was that some would commit and in the nick of time, then they would pull out. They would pull out from participating into this. Also, one of the biggest challenges that we also find was that when the study was being conducted, there was a lot of restructuring that was taking place. However, we also used that as a finding that will be highlighted there because we've realized that there were, in other instances, there were merging or splitting of these offices. So some offices would get it right, some offices would then merge this office, they would call special needs offices. They would refer to them as special needs offices and make them one, which spoke to what we were finding out, overburdening the offices. And also another big challenge is that in the study, when we were connecting the data, we also wanted to look at more than one individuals, especially within the unit. That's why it's supposed to be a unit. But the biggest challenge is that in most cases, only one or an individual was identifiable. And in most cases, the one individual that was identifiable was an alternative, not necessarily a GFP, a gender focal person. So that was most of the person. Thank you so much, colleagues. I did not go deeper into the limitation as they are highlighted in the report, as to allow my colleague to take you through the legislative and policy frameworks that we found that guided the study and also take you through the findings of the study. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to my co-presenter, Honsi. In the interest of time, I won't dwell too much on the, what is it called? I'll just say all protocol observed and I'll continue the presentation from here. My name is Tabani Mdlongwa. So as part of our studies, what guides us also is legislation and policy frameworks. It's important because it informs part of our key work. We are a constitutional body and obviously we subscribe, and South Africa as a country subscribes to a number of key legislation and policy frameworks. So there's just a list there. I won't really go through all of it, but key components there: the National Gender Policy Framework of 2000, obviously our constitution. We've got other things like the Beijing Platform for Action and Declaration, the CEDAW, which is the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And there are other protocols there, SADC, Protocol on Gender and Development, which inform our work. So that also is part of which informs also the report. So what were the findings of the 2023 study? Similar to the 2013 study, the findings illustrate that GFPs are still appointed below the required rank, which should be at the director level. So this is really quite unfortunate that 10 years on, from 2013-23, the findings only indicate that 19% of the GFPs who responded to the questionnaire are employed at the level of director. So only 19%, those who did respond, are employed at that requisite level. And that translates to close to 1 in 5 GFPs that are compliant with the policy, which really is not a good standing. Related to this is the location of the GFPs is key to translation of their work into departmental plans, the culture of gender equality programs, and the processes within those organizations. Earlier on, we talked that the GFPs really should be located in the Director General's office so that they have influence. And clearly, obviously, that hasn't happened from our current, from the study in 2023. Through the structures of government departments, provinces, and municipalities, power and influence is concentrated at the top, which is what I'm talking to, among senior officials and the conglomerate of those members and units. Within structures, meetings, and direction of organizations are coordination and assembled. So they need to be in positions where they can make influence and have the authority which they currently don't have. So just from those pie charts, which I will show here, so one of the questions asked, are the roles and responsibilities of the unit clearly defined? This is the gender focal point units. 78% said no, and 22% yes, which speaks again to clearly the uncoordination and lack of what the unit does. Secondly, does the unit perform functions related to gender mainstreaming, unrelated to gender mainstreaming, sorry, which is what my colleague talked about in the earlier findings. 67% said yes, they perform functions which are unrelated to gender mainstreaming, and then 33% said no, which is a cause for concern once again, as we said that this is a specialized kind of work, and most of them are performing other functions related to youth and disabilities and other functions which really are not within the gender mainstreaming function. Furthermore, we found that the proximity of the GFP to the accounting officer ensures that gender is always on the agenda, as GFPs are able to access, influence, and evaluate the work of the organization. The findings highlight that GFPs are often responsible for functions related to youth, persons with disabilities, the elderly, HIV, and other social matters. Yes, there might be intersections there, but they really need to focus on what really is their core mandate. The findings also indicated the 40% of GFPs had vacancies. So that translates to just over half of the human capacity attempting to fulfill the mandate of GFPs while simultaneously having other functions within their work without the appropriate rank. Regarding reviewing departmental policies and plans as per the NGFP of 2000, 61% of the GFPs reported having done so, while 39% reported them not having done any reviews. So in this regard, at least there was some kind of, better, response, that at least 61% of the GFPs did conduct some kind of review, and only 39% had not, but obviously that can be improved upon. 44% of the GFPs who responded to the survey reported not having monitoring and evaluation mechanisms for departmental projects and programs in line with the national gender policy. This proportion might not be in the majority, but is still worrying as it points to an existing gap in ensuring proper internal accountability in relation to gender mainstreaming within the departments, metros, and premiers' offices. This is important because part of the work is to evaluate what has been done, what are the changes, and if there are no M&E mechanisms, you actually don't know where you're going, how you stand currently, and what's the future like. The next slide there just also represents the pie charts there. There was a question on, does a representative from the GFP unit directorate sit on influential executive bodies within the department, province, or metro? And you can see from there, 64% said no, which is quite discouraging, and only 6% said yes, which speaks again to that they are not sitting in these important high-level functions, and they are not able to influence, the GFPs are not able to influence a lot of things. Then there's a question on, are the staffing needs adequate within the unit? And there you can see the statistics, a whopping 92% said inadequate, and only 8% of the GFPs were able, through our research, to said that they had adequate staffing needs within the unit, which speaks again to the issue of the financial and human resources which are not being given to the GFPs. Furthermore, in terms of our findings, we found that there was no seamless coordination within the 3 levels of government within a single department. No coherent single gender agenda within the departments existed, which created a fragmented strategy and implementation of what the gender agenda would be. So we're talking of provincial, national, provincial, and local, the 3 tiers of government, that there is no coordination in the one kind of single gender agenda. We also found that the Office of the Status of Women represents entire province and provincial position without particular note of each departmental plan, process, and strategy. Office of the Status of Women across the country was not always best placed to represent the department across all the provinces at national level. Lastly, policies and planning documents are in abundance. The conversion from policy to practice is the key pillar on the measure of lives changed. GFPs did not indicate an urgent need for legislative or policy reform. While it may eventually become necessary, the policies and legislation that exist were adequate and appropriate to ensure the enabling environment wherein the work would take place. So it goes back to the issue of implementation. The policies are there, but they are not being adhered to and they are not being implemented. We've got other findings also from the study. The first pie chart there looked at the proportion of the rank of GFP. As you can see from there, most of them from that pie chart were at the level of assistant director, which is very, very low. And as we said, the NFGFP says they should be at director level onwards. So chief director only 11%, and then director was, I think, they had 19%. At DDG level was 7%, which just goes to show, again, the issue of where they are placed is not adequate in terms of the policy and what we have recommended in the previous study. Then we also asked issues around types of training. This was quite important to see whether the GFPs are being capacitated. And from there, most of the training, you can see it was around gender mainstreaming, 45% there. The National Strategic Plan on GBV at 11%, gender responsive budgeting and sexual harassment there, 19%, and then the other trainings which they did get. So most of them did receive training on gender mainstreaming, which assists definitely with their function. But you can see from the different types of training that, yeah, the other trainings are not that much which they received, which they need to improve on. Our conclusions based on the study were that, firstly, the CGE concludes that there's been little or no progress since the last CGE report on GFP's effectiveness in 2013. Based on the findings of this current study, which showed that GFPs are generally appointed in the lower levels, ranks of the public service, in direct contradiction to the prescripts of the NGFP, which called for GFPs to be appointed at the level of director. Secondly, the CGE research team concluded that based on the findings of this study, GFPs continue to be burdened with work outside of their direct functions and responsibilities as prescribed by the NGPF. Thirdly, the CGE concluded that GFPs continue to face challenges related to inadequate staffing, training, skills, and capacity building within their units. We also concluded that GFPs are still faced with inadequate resources, including both financial and human resources, the findings of this study showed that 78% of respondents in the questionnaire argued that the budget is inadequate. Lastly, the CGE concluded that the necessary monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to ensure the proper functioning and coordination of GFPs was lacking. Based on this, then what were our recommendations from the study? We recommended that the recommendations we made in the previous study be actually implemented. So from the 2013 study, still have not. It was evident that 10 years post the recommendations CGE made, some government departments still remain without any GFPs or a reasonable alternative structure. The CGE also recommended that institutions develop effective internal strategies for ensuring the effective allocation of financial budgetary resources for the work of gender mainstreaming in government. Thirdly, we said that the role and positioning of the GFP must be reconfigured to reflect a clear understanding of the role of GFPs and their positioning. Also, the CGE recommend that GFPs be moved to the Director General offices or any office that will allow them an opportunity to directly influence policy. So we are going even a step higher than what the National Gender Policy recommends to say should be in the DG's office, not just even at director level. Fourthly, we said the CGE recommends that there be a GFP dealing only with gender-related issues, once again, for solely efficiency purposes, so that they can deal with the number of issues which are there. It's a specialized role, which shouldn't be taken for granted. So based on that, really, I think this should inform the next segment of the policy dialogue, where really we are trying to discuss what are the implications and policy solutions going forward. The report just gives a snapshot of what's happened, but the next discussions which will follow really to inform policy going forward and more accountability on the way forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for this report, for sharing with us the scientific study of what you have actually discovered, where you were determining as to whether there is progress made or whether there is no progress made. Colleagues, I would also want to ask us to just put our hands together again for the two colleagues, and also wanting to encourage the stakeholders online that you're more than welcome to join us as we take this round of applause. Colleagues, I think the presentation is really forcing us to ask critical questions, as we understand that we have a constitutional mandate and a duty to mainstream gender equality. And out of the study that we've just received, we can clearly see that it is really enforcing that area of accountability, because our constitution is actually telling us that government must live to its constitutional and political mandate, as well as its international commitments of making sure that gender equality is mainstreamed in its policies and in reality. So it is clear out of the report that there are deficiencies. There's little, if there is any movement that has been done based on the observations that were made during 2013. So 10 years down the line, we still see the same picture, and it then leaves us with serious questions, asking ourselves what is happening in the public space. Colleagues, as we move along, I am going to encourage our stakeholders online to download the report from our website. It's been made available. You can just go on www.cge.org.za and you will find today's report. And also, we've noted the request on the chat where the stakeholders are actually asking us to send today's pack of presentations, and I'm making that commitment that please leave your email addresses on the chat so that the back office can be able to facilitate that request. You will get those reports today. Colleagues, there is a slight change into the program. We were supposed to have the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities as the ministry to actually present on the opportunities and constraints for gender missionaries. And we've just received a message that the Chief Director, Ms. Maluleke, will not be able to join us today due to unforeseen circumstances. So we are not going to have that presentation. However, we make a promise to everyone else that we will continue with accessing that presentation, and it will be delivered amongst the pack that will be sent today. With that said, colleagues, then it means then that we are gonna now be moving to calling to the stage the acting HOD Legal, Mr. Shoping, to give us a presentations on the implications of non-compliance with CGE recommendations. The researchers have actually spoken quite extensively about the monitoring and evaluation aspect of the gender focal persons and therefore gender mainstreaming as a framework that must be applied in institutions. Therefore, HOD Shopping will be actually taking us through that presentation. HOD, please take on the stage.
Thank you, Program Director. All protocol observed as well in the sake of time. The presentation before us relates to the CGE mandate and the implications of non-compliance with the Commission's recommendations. I will go through the briefly within the 10 minutes that I'm having through the mandate of the Commission, the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, as well as the departmental functions of the Commission, and go through the conclusion. The Commission is a Chapter 9 institution. It's an independent statutory body established in terms of Chapter 9, and it further has powers and functions outlined in the Commission for Gender Equality Act. In terms of Section 181 of the Constitution, the Commission is a state institution with the purpose of strengthening constitutional democracy. It is independent, subject only to the Constitution and the law. It must be impartial and must exercise its powers and perform its functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. Through legislative and other measures, the organs of the state must assist the Commission in the performance of its functions, and they must ensure its independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness of these institutions of Chapter 9. And further, no person or state must interfere with the functioning of the Chapter 9 institutions in the performance of their functions. Right, in the next slide, we'll be going through the CGE mandate. Yes, Section 11, subsection 1B of the CGE provides that the CGE must develop, conduct, or manage information programs and education programs to foster public understanding of the matters pertaining to the promotion of equality and the role and activities of the Commission. Further, Section 11, subsection 1J empowers the CGE to conduct research or cause research to be conducted to further the object of the Commission. Section 11, subsection 1F provides that the CGE shall, as far as practicable, maintain close listening with institutions or bodies or authorities with similar objectives of the CGE in order to foster common policy and practices promote cooperation. Hence, today we are having this engagement as one of the initiatives, the policy dialogue that we be conducting today to ensure that we are maintaining that close licensing with institutions. Further, we are required in terms of Section 11(1)(g) to liaise and interact with organizations which effectively promotes equality and other sectors of civil society to further the object of the Commission. Hence, the need to ensure that we are collaborating. So this is one of the engagements we are having in ensuring that there is this collaboration as well as the licensing between the CGE and other departments in carrying the functions. In terms of Section 12 now, you heard what I said, that there was nothing compelling or forcing institutions in our functions to collaborate, which is carried through our research department, as well as education, public education and information department. Now, when we go further, where we have now to compel institutions, we in complying with the recommendations of the Commission, we look at Section 12, subsection 4B of the CGE Act. It empowers the Commission to issue a notice through a member of the Commission to compel persons to, through the administration of oath there, to obtain testimony from persons who may be in a position of information, also ask questions that the Commission needs, further to produce documents to the Commission that are in their position. So you'll see this functions comes in when we say, and we don't desire to be arriving at that conclusion, when we say collaboration has failed and also licensing or cooperation has failed. That is when we will be required to impose now our Section 12 provisions. And further, we have now offenses and penalties as provided in terms of the CGE Act, that is relating to when there is a failure to comply with the notices of the Commission and failure to provide information that is required or interruption there, and it carries the an offense and a conviction, an imprisonment of 6 months or a fine. What we need to encourage the public and the community as well as the stakeholders as the Commission is that collaboration is necessary. We must remember the Promotion of Equality and the Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act in doing our work. That legislation clearly provides for prohibition of unfair discrimination on the grounds of gender. Section 6 provides that no person may unfairly discriminate against a person on the ground of gender, including gender-based violence, female and genital mutilation, a system preventing women from inheriting family property, or any practice including customary religious practice which impairs dignity of women and undermines equality between men and women, including undermining the well-being of the girl child. And further, subsection E provides that we looked into any policy or conduct that unfairly limits access to women's rights, finance, and other resources, limiting also women's access to social services and benefits, also deny opportunities there, as well as systemic inequalities to access opportunities therein. Now, if we take that into consideration, that we are required not only in terms of the Constitution, not only in terms of the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, these are legislated as well. And now, as we have indicated, we have various departments in the Commission. And this policy engagement of today through our research department, it's encouraging this type of collaboration and participation and cooperation of departments in carrying its functions, and also furthered by other departments of public education and information. Now, the legal department will definitely then be engaged or will have to take necessary steps where cooperation is not coming forth in respect of the cooperation with the Commission through its other departments. And in conclusion, we have seen that 41 national departments engaged in sourcing the data here. Only 19 national responded and few provincial also responded. To address part of the recommendations includes government department must cooperate with the CGE to establish roles of the GFPs, respond to failure to establish gender units, and also collaborate. As one of the recommendations that were made, there needs to be collaboration with the CGE and the Portfolio Committee on Women, Children, and Persons with Disabilities to ensure to host public hearings. Therefore, this is an option that is still available to the Commission. Given the reports that we are looking forward to be receiving now, the Commission will then be interrogating these responses through this engagement to see now whether it will then be initiating the functions to compel the departments to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. As we reflect on the crucial role of the CGE in promoting and protecting gender equality in the Republic, it is essential to recognize the values of collaboration and listening between stakeholders and the CGE. By working together, we can foster a spirit of cooperation and mutual understanding. Next presentation. And further, the Commission seeks to address the systemic inequalities that persist in our society. By collaborating with stakeholders, we can inform policy decisions with credible data and evidence-based research, and joint efforts can ensure that policies and legislation address complex needs of diverse stakeholders, promoting equitable outcomes. We look forward to a progressive report with this engagement of today post the policy dialogue. We further look forward to taking legal steps to compel compliance with the CGE recommendations. Together we can build a more equitable society where every individual has the opportunity to thrive. We therefore reserve to issue notices at the moment post this engagement. Thank you.
I'm sure we can all agree, colleagues, that that was a legal person talking. So he's very clear in terms of what is it that must be done going forward, taking that from the legislation point of view, because we can all agree, colleagues, that gender equality, as per the CGE Act, it must be protected, it must be promoted, and it must be advanced. So he is very clear in terms of what then next, what should happen. We can see where the deficiencies are, and he is actually guiding us in terms of what the institution is going to be doing going forward as our way to respond to the study findings. Colleagues, without wasting much time, we have received the presentations, we've received the study, it's been tabled, we've received the observations from the provincial offices in terms of where we are, and in light of that, we are going to be opening an opportunity for discussions, not necessarily a question and answer session, but discussions amongst ourselves. And I would like then to invite our stakeholders online to, or rather, I would rather open up that opportunity for our stakeholders to engage with us. And we are going to be giving you an opportunity to just put up your hands so that we can have a structured way of recognizing those who would like to put out the discussion. And we are now opening up the opportunity for that. So we are encouraging you to put up your hands so that we can start with the discussion. There is a comment already on the chat, colleagues, that reads as follows: GFPs do not have the power to demand they should be placed in the DG's offices. How can CGE, DPSA, and DWYPD assist in this regard? This is the first question. Secondly, it's been asked, to what extent is CGE armed to force the recommendations that we make regarding any department or entity? Are our recommendations enforceable by law? The colleague is asking this because the work of GFPs is taken for granted, and yet it is serious. And she believes that if there was a penalty to pay, then CGE would then need to actually help and actually indicate as to what then next. I already see again that there are 3 hands that we have on the screen, and I'm trying to see and rather recognize that we have. Please open, Sila. We have Dipulelo as the first person. We have Casto, and lastly we have. Oh, okay, I can only see these 2 hands. Colleagues, in that order of priority, I would like to ask you to unmute your mics so that we can share the discussions that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Greetings to everyone on the platform, all protocol observed. I'm not sure if I'm audible, if I can just get an indication if I'm audible, Chairperson. Am I audible?
You're audible, ma'am.
Oh, thank you very much. Dipulelo Ho, Agenda Focal Point. First, I must applaud and welcome all the presentations. It's really heartwarming to see that there is work that is being done. And I must attest to the fact that all that was said in terms of the research, we are the true living testimonies of all the aspects that are being discussed in terms of the location where we are located, the concerns of our levels, and the level of work that is maybe imposed or that we are burdened with that are not even relevant to our work. But my main point is here. We had a meeting, a gender responsive budgeting a workshop by Department of Women. I'm not sure if there's a Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, that if anybody is here on this platform. I raised a question to the DG, who was the program director last week, to say, for the past 3-4 years, as I've been a gender focal point, I've done my research on our location. And as the policy says on page 29 that we must be located, as the research has been, the findings have said as well, to say we must be located in Director General's offices in case of Premier's offices. And in terms of departmental or offices in provincial government, we must report to accounting officers, which is our HODs. I posted that question to say, we since asked Department of Women and DPSA, as there was a bit of a misunderstanding to say who is responsible for what. When we asked DPSA, they said no, our responsibility is to, we are the ones who have the responsibility to put people on levels in terms of government, their responsibility. Department of Women says, yes, we do have this on our mandate as a government department to say where gender focal points must be placed. So I was posing that question to the DG, saying to her 2-3 years back we asked this question and you said you are on the process of working it out to say what must happen. But my concern is here, Chairperson, the last remarks that I had from the lady from Department of Women, they said they cannot reprimand or dictate to HODs or to departments where they must put the gender focal points. And for me, it was a bit discouraging to say, we've been talking about this for 4 years. Luckily, we have done research for over 10 years, and we are still sitting at a point where somebody can bluntly and boldly say, we can't dictate. Yet there's a policy that is there, but there's a way that it must be rearranged and people must come to an agreement. I'm with the speaker who posted the question on a virtual there to say, on the comment section, to say, what can be done? What can these 3 entities do in order for us to have a concrete decision on where we belong, who do we report to, and how our jobs are disaggregated? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. We've noted those concerns. And then we're now going to be recognizing Castro, followed by Nolubabalo, Mandisa, Numvula, Vuiswa, and Dora. In that order, colleagues, you may just unmute your mics in that order, and then share your discussions. Thank you.
Greeting and thanks for allowing me this opportunity. I am Castro Msinyari. I speak representing an organization called We Are Fathers, We Are Parents Forum. I speak also as a victim of systematic injustice in the child care law of the country, whereby what is left for me now to be the parent of my child whose mother passed on 8 years ago. I need to go to the Supreme Court of Appeal because all the lower courts have failed me. So this situation has been a wake-up call to me, and I've always commended the Commission for Gender Equality for the role it's playing sometimes, although I think it's limited. But I know in 2021 there was a report called When Relations Disentangle, which also identified and point out all the challenges that are causing some of the things that some of us are experiencing. But as I continue to assist fellow fathers, mothers as well, who face the same problem, whereby they are prevented from having access to their children and raising their children properly. And then when they go to the legal system, they find gender bias, which is supported by the laws or maybe by individuals who misinterpret the law. I am concerned as well that even where there is contempt of court, the contempt of court of a parenting plan is not treated the same as any other contempt of court. So I just wanted to request maybe the Commission for Gender Equality to do maybe some research on issues of contempt of court of parenting plans, whereby people don't get arrested or charged. And even where they are charged, there are instances where we have pushed for matters to be brought to court. You find that first thing is the police normally would refuse or be reluctant to open cases until we push. Sometimes we push, we speak to the provincial inspectorate. They do assist at some point in different cases. Sometimes we speak to control prosecutors who do assist, but some element of push is needed for the law to be applied in order for mainly the fathers who will be suffering this prejudice to be protected by the law. And I believe many fathers are depressed, and this has a potential to create gender-based violence, because when the law is failing, it means somebody might resort to doing something by themselves. So I would like to make a plea to the Commission for Gender Equality to engage stakeholders like SAPS, the NPA, the DSD, because social workers are in the middle of this as well. I'm dealing with a case now where I understand a presiding officer even threatened to report a social worker who is facilitating foster care system, a process for a child who lost her mother, and they are coaching the aunt in order for her to evade the law, and they know that the law normally would side with a maternal side of the family. So this is creating a lot of commotion and it's breaking children. That is why we have all the problems of drugs on our children who are being raised without fathers or father figures in their families. We've got teenage pregnancies and all the crime, and we need to try and root out the cause of this problem, which part of is the fatherlessness, which 71% plus in the country, and specifically with black children. So I just wanted to make that plea to say, please, let's look at the child care system. I know that one of the recommendations by the Commission for Gender Equality on the report when relations disentangled is the amendment of Section 21 of the Children's Act. I know there is a process that I believe is underway, the Children's Amendment Bill, which started the process in, I think it was in 2020. I don't know where it is by now, but the process is too slow and we are continuing to suffer and we are continuing to feel like we are left out when gender is being mentioned. It feels like gender means female, that needs to be corrected so that all the citizens are protected according to the. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Castro. We're now going to be taking Mandisa Nolubabalo, Nomvula, Vuiswa, Dora, and Leonie. In that, oh, okay. Sorry about that. And our Commissioner Van der Merwe. Colleagues, please grab the mic, unmute, and then you may ask your question. Thank you. Or share insights with us.
Thank you, colleagues, for an extensive presentation. I am just interested in understanding how. Thank you. I would like to understand how you make sense of the disempowering and the sidelining of GFPs. What do you think contributes to that? Because I think it's a little, I think the non-compliance is a little worrying and speaks to the sidelining of the question of gender itself. I wonder what you think are the contributing factors to that and how you make sense of that and what the way forward looks like in terms of fixing that. From Eastern Cape Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Let me start by appreciating the session and as well as the presentation. I fully concur with the Polelo, the first speaker in this session of question and answer. My interest would be, has the report been shared with the accounting officers and being made to account? Because when you look back, it's from 2000, nothing has been done. And we've been singing the same song. And I'm speaking from the basket of SPU, where you would get gender, youth, and disability in one room. And that is being placed on the periphery in the department. Hence, I'm asking, this report, apparently, the study was done in 2013. Has this been shared with the accounting officers and they have been made to account, also consequences shared with them if the findings of the report have not been implemented? Also, my interest is on the issue. I do not know whether who's running away from the responsibility between DPSA and the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, because the question of location of the gender focal person in our case is special programs. None of the departments between the two departments want to take a responsibility. And DPSA always say they don't have authority over departments when there is time for restructuring. And the response from DPSA would be, if we talk gender focal persons or SPU, that will be placed somewhere in the department because they consider related functions and not take into account the legislative frameworks that are mandating the placement and location of SPU or gender focal person. Can the commission maybe make us understand whose responsibility is it? Because the submission of organizational structures are submitted to DPSA, the same department that is saying it doesn't have authority to decide over the organizational structures of department, whereas the National Policy Framework on Gender is clear on where this function should be located. That is all for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nol Babalo. Nomvula, you may please ask your questions, or rather share your insights with us. She'll be followed by Vuiswa, Deborah, and Commissioner van der Merwe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson, and thanks for this insightful presentation by all the presenters. Chair, I'm Nomvula Makhotlo. I'm from the Department of Small Business Development. Mine is around the compliance, of course, with the recommendations, the statutory recommendations of the placement, the resourcing and so on of gender focal persons. Chairperson, I think it's so unfortunate that departments have a way of ensuring that they seem to be complying. They would tick all the right boxes, and yet nothing is happening in terms of a transformation of gender within those departments. The point in cases where the A department would actually appoint a focal person, place them in the DG's office, but those focal persons are, like what the report is saying, are not resourced in terms of the budget, in terms of additional staff. So I'm not sure to what extent does the CGE is the CGE mindful of the issue of the budget, because you may be how well positioned and how well situated in the department, and yet if that person is operating with the zero-based budget, it doesn't matter. So I think whatever that happens in your assessments, please do not only confine yourselves to whether there is a unit, whether there is a person, at what level is this person. Also look at the resources that goes with any responsibility. It can't be an unfunded a mandate, really, because nothing is going to happen, and that person is set up for failure, because they'll be waiting for maybe for the third quarter, when people realize that they are sitting with a lot of money that they can't do anything with it, and then they throw it to this person or this unit, and by then there is very little that one can do with that money. Another thing is the issue of I mean, this function, Chairperson, should not suffer the same fate as the BEE compliance, where institutions actually budget for the penalties and then not comply. So we also need to guard against that yes, Chairperson, some institutions would rather budget for that compliance rather than comply. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nomvula. Vuiswa, you may unmute and share the insights with us, followed by Deborah. And lastly, it would then be Commissioner van der Merwe. Thank you, colleagues, in that order.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And let me also take this opportunity to really acknowledge the informative presentations as well as the recommendations, which are eye-opening, and the spirit in which this has been done today and presented. And I'm Vuiswa Pukakoto. I'm the Gender and Diversity Management Officer in Education in Free State. Started last year with the office. And I'm going to repeat, I'm sorry that if there are colleagues who logged on to the meeting of the Department of Women, People with Disability, and so on, and are going to hear this for the second time, it's because of frustration. And I'm raising it in my department, I'm raising it everywhere until somebody somewhere listens and understands. One, as somebody who is new in the office, who exactly is responsible for capacitation of gender focal persons? I know that CGE does capacitate us, calls us now and then, but is it the responsibility of CGE? Who exactly is responsible? Let's say, for instance, one day I have to leave and I do a handover report. Who do I direct the person to for capacity building in terms of building the office? That's number one. Number two, I'm tempted to talk about Circular 49 of 2024 of the PSA, where they are locking out all appointment of in departments, because that is also killing the offices that need resources. When you thought you are going to achieve having people in your office, being in a provincial office and being the only person who's doing this work for officials and all the schools in a province, responsible for 127 learners in the province. It's not easy to do that alone. So I'm agreeing with the colleagues that are talking about resources. And also I agree with the speaker that spoke before the one I'm speaking after now, who actually emphasized the question in terms of placement of gender focal persons. It is true. Dipulelo told the truth. When we asked actually who is supposed to deal with this matter of non-compliance, I think I heard clearly that we were told we must do that ourselves. And how do you do that when actually in the same department you don't even sit at the table for decision making? Somebody else sits there, and you write letters, you arrange your meetings, you do your public service management week meetings, you emphasize these things, and nothing is going on. So I'm reiterating that question to say who is supposed to force the implementation of the location and resourcing. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Appreciate the platform.
Thank you, Voice. Thank you, Voicewa. We're now going to be moving to Dora, and lastly, Commissioner van der Merwe. You may take on the stage, colleagues. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues, once more, and thanks so much for this informative session, and really thanks for the presentation. I must say I'm one of those gender focal persons that have been there throughout the life of this particular attempt to say what is the positioning of the GFPs. I was there long around early 2010s when the commissioners came and made the HODs to speak under oath in terms of what the levels of their GFPs are and what they are going to do about that. Fast forward, maybe 13 years later, there was a report in 2013, and there's still a report now, but nothing has changed. I'm also speaking, just like the previous speaker, I'm from the Department of Education in the Northwest. I'm the gender focal person. I'm not at the level of senior management, though I have knocked at doors to explain that should be the policy and that should be the position. But I must say, like we say, over and above the changing of management positions at the top, you keep hammering on the same fact over and over again. until you learn to just adjust. I'm also provincially placed. At the moment, there is I am at the level of deputy director, there is an assistant director that has been appointed for the first time since I was here last year, July. That's the time I got a new person who is now number 2 for the entire province. And remember, in the province, you don't just deal with gender program at the level of the province or for the employees. You also have to go down to the learners also. As we all know, the scourge of gender-based violence, for example. So everything you speak about, you have to make sure that you are effective for over 1 million learners and over 30,000 employees based at provincial level. And the issue of inadequate resources have been labored upon. I won't dwell into that, but I must say I concur with all that the challenges that colleagues have alluded to. I'm looking also at the fact that after all that perpetual inequality that has ensued, if really we have to speak of, for example, unequal pay, where there have been colleagues over 15 years who have been at particular levels, where and how do you address that? Because obviously we are working out of passion, but there are also career outcomes for women. And I know of women in particular, there is one in a particular department who was at salary level 8. Now you ask yourself, what is that and how do you really redress that? But my worry is that after 10 years, why did it have to take 10 years for us to review whether there was progress or not? Why didn't we build into that, at least ongoing progress, even if it could have been 5 years, where, as we know, strategic planning happens every 5 years. Maybe we would have realized that we are not making any progress, and maybe we would have explored other avenues. But not all is lost. We are looking at this from a level of saying that glass is half full. How do we then move forward to that? But it would really be heartening if we could see consequence management for non-compliance, because obviously this amounts to unfair labor practice. And I've heard from the legal services that there will be public hearings, and I'm wondering how long are the public hearings going to take? It will be another protracted struggle, and most of us maybe might have left the system by the time there is, not that it's for us, but I'm just saying this affects so many people, and especially women who are in those positions, who have to deal with gender, youth, children, persons with disabilities, and older persons as well, like in our case, in the department. So we really appreciate that. For starters, it seems like something will start happening, and we hope that our legal services really take a tough stance, please, in terms of this matter. And I would really like to thank you for the opportunity.
We're now going to be moving to, sorry, I think that was Dora. We're now going to be moving to our last commentator, Commissioner van der Merwe. And after that, we will then go through the comments that are on the chat so that we can all have a view of the discussion that is happening there. So Commissioner van der Merwe, you may please unmute and talk to us. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson, the CGE, colleagues on the call. Chairperson, you were correct in calling me Leonie when you first told me when to speak. I'm not a commissioner, but I do receive the blessing that you are bestowing upon me. Thank you. I'm actually a gender focal point for Gauteng Department of Social Development, in Gauteng Province. I am a director. I do have a unit. I am located in the office of the HOD. I do sit on all strategic meetings of the department, and my staff as well. They sit on, for example, employment equity committees, budget committees, and so on. I also, I have two concerns, and the one is how are the not really concerns, two issues. How are the invitations extended to participate in the study? Because I cannot recall that a invitation was extended to our department unless we were one of those departments that were not, or provinces that were not called to participate in the last study. What I want to suggest in this regard is that the CGE perhaps do a database of all gender focal points in the various provinces and national departments, so that when information about any CGE activity that concerns gender focal points then be also copied to us, so that we are also aware of any issue, any activity that is going on. That's the first thing. The second, I want to also concur with the previous speaker that perhaps the CGE can call the exact same dialogue with accounting officers, because the people who are here are the gender focal points and other stakeholders, but the accounting officers are actually the people who need to hear this feedback and who need to hear about the struggles, concerns that the gender focal points have. So that was my first issue. The second issue is that we are currently undergoing a organogram restructuring in our department, and in this organogram restructuring, they have placed my unit now under a chief director for M&E, and they've also added to the unit's tasks issues of SDI, service delivery improvement. Already what we do, and we don't complain because I have 6 staff members. So how we run ours is we have assistant directors who will look at gender mainstreaming. Some will look at disability mainstreaming and youth mainstreaming. And we also have SAOs, and we have a deputy director. So we carry the load, I would say, quite equally between us, and it's not a problem. And me, as the former focal point, I am on a directorate level. My concern is that if the DPSA is not able to intervene, and then I'm also worried about the future of our directorate, my directorate, because where our restructuring is at this time is at the DPSA. I have, when they consulted me, I have referred them to the policy on the gender focal points, and I was told that the policy holds no water at the time. So this issue that I'm raising now is DPSA should really take a stance, because when we have meetings and DPSA is present, they would say Gauteng Province social development is a benchmark, is how they want gender focal points to operate. But if that same department is then now going to approve this new structure where we are in place under chief director, the more you place under someone, the more you don't have a voice. That is just how that works in government departments. So thank you very much. And sorry for my voice. I'm actually off sick at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Leonie, and thank you so much to other colleagues who have actually engaged us on this discussion element. Colleagues, I am going to propose that we structure our responses in this fashion. There are questions that I think are directed to the research department in terms of just demonstrating as to how much of these reports have been shared with the implicated departments, or rather with the public service heads. I think the emphasis is sharing these with the accounting officers more than anything, so that we ensure that they are aware of our findings, because we are expecting a response thereof. So that was the question for the research department. And I think another question, in as much as people might have, repeated the same thing, but I think the question was around the concern as to why did CGE take 10 years to do the review? Why was this not done at least biannually, so that we can be able to get indicators out of the findings that we've made? Because with that, we wouldn't be repeating what we are saying today, should there had been a shorter, what you call, follow-up study. So those were the questions. Other questions, as we can see, colleagues from the program, that we have queued in the accounting officer, Dr. Matotoka, to give us a way forward. Some of the questions that were asked, he is going to respond on those high level in his way forward, because I think these are the questions that are just meant for CGE to give a way forward of saying, therefore, what are we doing moving forward? So I'm going to be asking that we then do that. But I think before I give the floor to Naledi and Dr. Matotoka, I'm going to just go through a few comments that are on the chat, so that if people perhaps are limited in terms of technology from viewing them, that we are on the same page. So the first question came from BO. I will call you BO, where BO is welcoming the presentations, thanking CGE, and the question is, SGFPs, we would like to see these recommendations being implemented, and there should be consequence management to the departments that are not complying. I think most of the speakers shared the same what you call sentiments, where you are saying, CGE, what are you doing about non-compliance? Why are you not imposing consequence management? Dr. Matotoka will respond on that when he responds about the legal standing of CGE powers. The sentiment is we cannot have departments who are still having GFPs at lower levels. Everyone else has this feeling. And then from DD, the question is, DD is from Free State Province, Arts and Culture Department. He has a remark saying that, can the offices of political heads and HODs be educated on our roles, as we sometimes experience problems from the very offices? We're busy correcting the wrong, but some HODs and EAs are working against this progress and are not welcoming and supporting the mandate. What contributes as a factor is, 1, lack of knowledge of GFP's responsibilities by top management, as well as lack of political will. Secondly, lack of will to provide resources. And every time there's a new change of leadership, we start from scratch, meaning the changes destabilizes the work that would have been, progressed. So chances are that they have their own perspectives of what special programs is according to what they think they know. On that one, I'm going to be asking the acting DDPI to respond in terms of what the Commission is doing from a gender mainstreaming point of view, because I just think that it is very important that we talk about that, so that we can be able to just share insights of what CGE is doing, because I want to believe that having a gender mainstreaming framework in the institutions could be really a response, or rather an enabler, that is going to answer a number of these concerns that we are talking about. So another question from SM says that Mhlo Bongane is actually sharing a sentiment where he says that the biggest problem is that ever since the democratic government took over, gender work has been an unfunded mandate. What then do we do about the issue of shortage of resources? Yes, resources are an issue. However, the issue of being central in terms of decisions and policies that must be done in institutions, that part at least, it does not really require funding, but it really requires a proper placement of gender focal persons, as we have actually indicated earlier on. This is a comment. And then Advocate Gumede, one of our commissioners, is asking, she cannot believe that organizations budget for non-compliance, that there is no a provision. I want to believe that is what she meant. This is unacceptable. Thank you all for sharing these incredible insights. Thank you, Commissioner. Another question is from the Global Development Consortium stakeholder, and a question is, firstly, the Development Consortium is actually acknowledging the presentation from the research department. So as a human rights activist and transgender community leader with a regional body, has faced significant challenges, including surveillance including the surveillance of my residence, break-ins, and a lack of support from South African police services in addressing my case. This is an individual case, but linking to what we are discussing today, as a Black transgender woman, I am deeply concerned that state bodies appear to have little vested interest in protecting the rights of marginalized groups like myself. Despite these ongoing threats to my safety, I have received assistance only from international agencies, forcing me to relocate more than 5 times within a year. Given the gravity of these circumstances, my question to CGE is as follows. What specific policies or measures are in place to address the vulnerabilities and security needs of Black transgender women in South Africa, especially those who face targeted violence and harassment? Furthermore, how does the Commission intend to work with state bodies like SAPS to ensure the protection and enforcement of the rights of transgender individuals, ensuring that cases are taken seriously and support is provided? So this question, colleagues, cannot be divorced from what we are discussing today, as much as we are discussing the role of gender focal persons, but then there's an interest from the stakeholder wanting to know what programs do we have. So I hope DDPI, you will be able to actually wing this question into what you will be responding on. Another question from Charlotte Clark is, are the reports sent to municipalities? Research department will respond on that. I realize that women speak from their pain, but we must stop criticizing or attacking men. This leads to crime and violence. I've seen men crying because of the way they are treated by their partners. We must stop referring to race in our country when addressing women's issues. That way, people would not want to be part of the direction we must take. We need the political will to move forward. Dr. Matotoka, I want to believe that you will then be able to respond on this matter in your way forward. Deborah Vuisabuka is... asking Deborah to please call her back. And another question is, yes, this is a light moment, colleagues. Then we also have Motsawu, who is commending the Commission for the mammoth research task, which has been achieved. He's saying big ups to the research department, and does wonder, could it be that in 2033, CGE will commission a study which will reveal similar findings yet again? Despite the knowledge, it remains that GFPs continue to be marginalized by decision makers who are non-compliant and maintain gender inequality through a status quo in policy decision making by senior government officials that normalizes and internalized sexism at the genetic institutional level. across society. So I think this comment ties with the other one, where we were actually saying that, where the stakeholder was saying that let's look into the gender equality issues broadly. Could the gender mainstreaming focus possibly also move towards affecting behavioral change at the genetic institutional level alongside legislative measures? This research process seems to reproduce systems of knowledge and their resulting recommendations, which are unable to effect change in senior government official brains, ultimately resulting in societal replications of gender inequality, because those responsible for making crucial decisions are affecting South African citizens' lives, who make decisions counter to progress. So thank you so much. This is Mutsawu from Virginia in the Free State Province. Lastly, a comment is from Dipolelo, a gender focal person from DSEC. And the question is that, DD from Free State, lastly, we are loaded with implementation of the NSP for GBVF without a budget. So this is, again, another issue of resource allocation, which is a big outcry out of the discussions, or rather the insights that we are getting today. Then what then do we do about these things? So I think let me start by giving the floor to acting HOD Research to give us her response in terms of what's been asked, and then after her we'll then move to Koketso to take us through the work that the institution is doing on gender mainstreaming and other PI initiatives. And lastly, we will then, I want to believe, but now we shouldn't be saying anything after your talk, so you will close it for us, and you will then be the last speaker to respond. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Pili. Let me first appreciate all the engagements with the report, both positive as well as those that were constructive criticism being given. I wanted to first start by clarifying that when we put the policy dialogue on the agenda, the anticipation or the expected goal for us was that the accounting officers will be present here today. Our letters of invitation are quite clear. We had different levels of invitations. The initial one is written to the DG or HOD, clearly stating that their presence is required here, failing which they can nominate another senior official who will be on behalf of the department giving responses here today. It was not another venting sessions. We understand that colleagues have various forums in which they meet and discuss these issues. So today it was an accountability mechanism. We wanted the DGs to be here. Questions that have been asked around the role of the DPSA, the role of the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, and how CGE comes into play as well in that regard. We were expecting that these issues would be fleshed out here right now today and not 10 years later. However, it is typical whenever you write an invitation to say the issue that is being placed on the table has to do with the gender machinery or issues of gender, the invitation would be passed down to the gender focal person. They have to go and deal with it. But I must state and reiterate the fact that we were clear in our letters of invitation. But of course, we invited the GFPs directly, as well as civil society organizations and so communities more broadly, because we believe everybody has a stake. But colleagues, that's not the intention. It was not for GFPs to come and tell us again what has already been ventilated through the presentation. But I think Dr. Matotoka will also speak to that. It is disappointing. Colleagues, the same format is followed. For us, we follow that protocol. When we invite institutions to participate in our research. Our letters are signed by our accounting officer addressing the counterpart. So in terms of invitations that did not reach colleagues where they are, for them to participate in our study, it could be that there was a loss of communication or breakdown in communication within their own department, because we send the first letter, then we do countless of follow-ups. It's the most frustrating part of our job that we shouldn't be doing, because if there's clear commitment and will, the expectation is that as soon as we say we need information, colleagues should be availed to come through and participate. I can tell you, I was at the CGE at the time in 2023, colleagues were struggling tremendously to obtain cooperation from the various ministries and departments. So to my colleague who was asking why they did not get the invitation, we do not write directly so that there's accountability at the end of the day. Because what we see is that if you write to an individual, there'll be excuses sometimes, you know. Yes, sometimes they will get it, but sometimes there'll be excuses when they do not participate to say, I don't make those decisions, I can't speak to you without clear or proper permission being granted for me to represent the institution with the knowledge that I will be sharing, with the information that I will be divulging. Because part of what we do, it's not just the survey, it's not just the interviews, but we also sometimes request documents, departmental planning documents, monitoring documents, etc. So obviously individuals would need permission to share those, but we understand these are public institutions, that information should be made public in any case. So I wanted to clarify that and to say, yes, our reports have been shared since 2013. If colleagues could just, what is it? I wanted to say rewind. I don't know if that's the correct word, but go back to my opening remarks when I was giving the intention for today's session. I indicated that the first leg of the study was taken through a series of policy dialogues. With this one, we did not even host it just at nationally. Colleagues flew down to provinces, and I think one of the speakers alluded to that. The fact that HODs were even made to account to say what will be done differently. And again, of course, we find ourselves where we are. But we went to every province. And I wanted to say, I mean, colleagues have asked questions around why is this still the case? Why are we still struggling? It's a clear indication that there is a lack of will, a lack of prioritization of gender issues. For a very long time, gender issues have been relegated or been regarded as women's issues. So the same resistance that women face when fighting for their own issues is what we see in the case of GFPs and the fundamental important work that they have to do. You'd be shocked. In one of the policy dialogues, I think it was in Limpopo, I was, fresh in the institution when this was undertaken. Senior officials had the audacity to ask, so what must we do with all the men? Must we kill them in order for the women's agenda or priorities to take precedence or to be prioritized? And to date, we still get these questions. There's a question around the relevance of our study and whether we shouldn't rather be doing attitude changes or behavioral change programs. I mean, when the Auditor General comes out with their findings, the same question is not asked. Clear accountability is demanded. However, in our regard, we must first go and change people's perspectives. These aspirations are in our constitution, the founding document of a democracy. They are in the international instruments, specifically Beijing Platform for Action. There is the National Gender Policy Framework. We know it's under review. We were hoping colleagues from the Department of Women would take us through what has been taking place in that regard. So these are there, clearly written down. They are commitments that the country has signed to or set for itself. So why is that when the CGE comes in to demand accountability, then we are asked for behavioral change? At that level, it should already exist. Why are people in public service who are there and have not changed their own understanding? This should be fundamental. Every leader, every manager, at the back of what they do, or at the core of what they do, gender equality and gender mainstreaming, gender transformation should be the backdrop. So honestly, it's a bit, I don't know. Maybe CEO will explain better. I may have not understood, but it cannot be that when we demand accountability, then we must first start by changing people's mindsets. What we should be doing is to say, how are we advancing? What are the new learning opportunities or areas that have been introduced as we learn, as more research is being done? Not that we must go back and school people on a constitutional imperative. Gender equality is a constitutional imperative. Why 10 years? I think that's a legitimate question, but I wanted to say, so officially, yes, it took us 10 years to review the work. But in between that, a lot of work has been undertaken. This work or body of work is also reflected in our CEDAW report of 2020, where we talk about the national gender machinery. There were specific recommendations given to the state party. So we have done sort of a review of how far we are with the national gender machinery as well as provincial machineries. So that is in there. And part of the background I gave also touched a little bit on that. However, you're correct, colleagues, officially it took us 10 years. But as the CGE, we also participate in the NGM structures, wherein we follow discussions, so we are aware of some of the steps that have been taken. So these issues, for us to even place this on the agenda, it's because we saw that it is a critical issue that has not been attended to. We've produced several reports in the past, and in our selection for this year's policy dialogues with our limited resources and so on, we said we believe that this is one of the key reports that we must take up for this particular process, with the hopes that there will be strong, rigorous engagements on the way forward, but clearly there may be a need for us to take this forward outside of this discussion, because we must account back to say what has the CGE achieved from this work. It cannot just be limited to today. We were hopeful that we'll hear from the DGs, we will hear from the HODs. They are not here. That's more work for us because we cannot just leave things hanging. But it is important, colleagues, that I highlight that our work has been ongoing. If we even had Liandi, one of the provincial managers from the Free State office, she came in to give sort of observations that they have noted. It's because our work is ongoing. It does not end when a report is published. We carry on with conversations, we carry on with discussions, and to influence discourse, but to also partake in an ongoing discourse on issues. And we do not hope that 10 years down the line we will find the same recommendations. I also wanted to emphasize that it's a fairly new program of reviews, of monitoring or evaluations of our recommendations, newly introduced by the recent cohort of commissioners who felt the need for us to always track back to say, what has come out of your recommendations? Because, you know, there's a mass production of reports, but what are you achieving out of that? It's a recently or newly adopted practice in the institution. It could also be part of the reasons it has taken long to officially produce a report. But like I said, the work is ongoing, and we'll continue this for other studies that we have been doing as well. The issues of resources and budgets, colleagues were saying we shouldn't just emphasize the status or role or rank of GFPs, but also touch on the issue of budget and resources. I can confirm that it is there in the report, colleagues. It's just that this one keeps coming up because of the level of authority that we believe GFPs should have in order for change to be effected and for actions to be taken. However, the report does cover that aspect. It's there in the report, I think also in the presentation, we may have missed it, but it talks to budget and other resource constraints. It also talks about human resource constraints. So that is found in the report. As soon as you get it, colleagues, you will be able to just indulge even further. And has the report been shared with accounting officers? Absolutely, both. Reports have been shared as well as with municipalities. Our administrator also worked tirelessly, even this time around, as we are planning the current dialogue that is underway, that is taking place right now, to share the report widely. So the reports have been shared. So, Pili, in terms of technical questions or those in relation directly to the report or the work of the department, those are my not so brief responses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Naledi. After that, all right, thank you. Thank you, Naledi, for those straight to the point responses. We will then move now to DDPI acting to give responses on the work that CGE is doing on gender mainstreaming, and also particularly looking at what is it that we are doing, not just on gender mainstreaming, but to educate publics and to engage stakeholders on anything that is meant to protect and advance gender equality. Over to you, Koketso. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I want to greet the audiences. I want to greet everyone who is on the live streaming platforms. My name is Koketso Siku. I am the Acting Deputy Director in the Public Education and Information Department. So I like where this conversation is going because colleagues are aware of what they should be doing. However, there is a gap and there are a lot of concerns. And thank you, colleagues, for bringing out those concerns. So I'm from the PI department, Public Education Department. And I just want to put it out there first to say gender focal persons must play a crucial role in promoting accountability. As far as we are concerned, when we came back from the Beijing Platform of Action, this was a requirement. It was a crucial requirement that we need to go back and make sure that gender focal persons exist. So now we are on the crossfire. We don't know actually what is it that we are supposed to be doing. And at the same time, systems are also failing us. So I'm saying that a gender focal person must play a crucial role in promoting accountability for gender mainstreaming within organizations and institutions, both in the public and private sector. Also, gender focal person should and must advocate the implementation of gender policies, ensuring that these policies are effectively integrated into departmental strategies. That's what you are supposed to do. By monitoring compliance, gender focal persons must identify gaps, recommend corrective actions, fostering a culture of accountability throughout the organization. Now, the question is that happening? And I've heard responses here that a lot of times gender focal persons they don't know where to begin. They don't know how to implement their work, and there is no support, especially from accounting officials. So I just want to share with you what we do in the Department of Education. And colleagues, you may have heard that our work is, we integrate our work a lot across the departments. So when we now doing gender mainstreaming from a public education perspective, and I will mention what we are doing in the current financial year. So colleagues, in the current financial year, we have expanded our gender mainstreaming work. We have also made it very intentional that we target the private sector and also we target the public sector. But then our gender mainstreaming approach, it is very, very specific. It is very intentional because we have seen that there is a lot of missed opportunities when we have been, doing our best to making sure that gender mainstreaming is achieved. So I want to highlight the objectives of gender mainstreaming in public education. So we promote the use of gender mainstreaming approach in planning, budgeting, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs. We also go out to facilitate a gender-responsive identification, analysis, and formulation of policies and programs. So now, when we're doing that, we want to make sure that we establish strategic relationships with key role players, because we have been emphasizing that gender mainstreaming initiatives need to be intentional. So this is what we do. We make sure that we establish strategic relationships with key role players in all these institutions. We also go as far as encouraging the promotion and protection of gender equity values and standards when we are doing gender mainstreaming, because at the end of the day, the key role here is to making sure that people understand the gender mainstream is not just a story. We're not telling a story, but we should also remain compliant, respect the fact that everyone needs to be equal, and then also we need to promote and protect our constitution. It speaks to gender mainstreaming. So also in the public education department, what we do is that through the recommendations that has been done, you have heard that in the legal department, we do investigative hearings where we'll call accounting officers to account, and then we'll offer recommendation. Also in our report departments, we do give out recommendations. So now the public education department will come in, and then we will mainstream, we will assist you in making sure that you become compliant. This is where now we make sure that we come up with education programs that will speak to the recommendations. And I will make an example of what we do. So this is for all the provinces. What we do in the public education is that we don't only go to GFPs, but because we are doing a sector approach, a gender mainstreaming, we are now making sure that we gather all sectors that needs to be mainstreamed, or sectors that have appeared before the commission, and then we go through gender mainstreaming initiatives. So another part that speaks to gender mainstreaming in our department is that we have a gender audit tool, or we can say a gender transformative tool. This is also where it complements the work of the research department. We intentionally analyze, we dispatch, right? And then we require the sector or the departments to fill in this audit tool. And then I will also emphasize that we approach the accounting officers so that it can cascade down to other officers or to departments that are responsible, because this audit tool, it doesn't only require, but it requires a well strategic plan so that it can be populated. Then this is where you will also assist your institution to see if really you are on par in terms of gender responsive work, you are on par with gender legislations, or you really understand what you are required to making sure that you comply and then you respect gender equality. And then other programs that we have in the Public Education and Information Department, but also that amplifies the work of gender mainstreaming. We go as far as generating information dissemination initiatives. This is through outreach, where we go to communities and conduct physical outreach. This is now where we go out of our institutions and we go to ordinary citizens to speak about, issues of gender equality, and where we try to rectify and bring remedies of equity within our communities. And this is also where we speak and interpret legislation that supports the work of gender equality. We also generate and also have good stakeholder liaisonship within this dissemination category, where we collaborate with stakeholders to generate messages on gender equality. For instance, as you are sitting right now, you might have noticed, if maybe you are working with the Commission for Gender Equality, that we have what we call campaign SMSs. This is where really we have taken a step to say, you know what, even at the comfort of your own home, this is where you can be reminded about the legislations, the work of the CGE, the key themes of the CGE that would like you to understand, know, so that you can also be sensitized about gender equality. We also go as far as conducting radio outreach. This is where education officers, will have partnerships with community radio, and then we harness the skills of talking to people and educating them about strategic and also gender equality themes that are very, very important. For instance, we are now discussing the role of the GFP. You will hear that probably next week, messages from one of our education officers speaking further more on how we can encourage GFPs to be part and parcel of this gender equality conversations, and also how to encourage institutions to respect the work of GFPs. And then also we do accountability stakeholders. These are stakeholders where, we make sure that organizations, institutions remain compliant. This is where we'll also call you in at our provincial levels, and we want to ascertain for you to outline where are the gaps, why is it that you are not compliant in issues that impede on the achievement of gender equality. I'll make an example of that, and this is also where GFPs also come in, because they are responsible of identifying key issues that bring exclusion and inequalities. For instance, in the Gauteng province, we had a stakeholder, an accountability stakeholder on informal work, because we've realized that the economy now is vast, but however, there is this cohort of informal work or informal individuals, individuals in the informal economy where they are not protected by legislation, and they are also marginalized. So as the CGE, we took it upon ourselves to say it is very, very important that this cohort is included in policy formulations so that they can enjoy the benefits of policies that are protecting, people in formal and working employment. So in a nutshell, I will stop there, but I just wanted to say that this is the work that you are doing. And lastly, I want to also share, I think it was a colleague from the Free State Province. So a colleague from the Free State Province, yes, the answer is yes. Heads of department and political leaders can be educated on gender mainstreaming through various programs that are offered, that we offer to institutions. Like I say, that you are privy, to write to the commission, you are privy to communicate to the commission. So you are allowed to do that. And then these programs that we do, we customize it, and we can also do gender and development workshops. This is content that we can generate through a needs analysis, where we identify what are the challenges, the inequalities in your organizations. And because I said, and what I like is because our CG Act also gives us the powers to making sure that you comply, to making sure that when we ask for information, you give us that information that has to do with compliance issues, you will be able to do that. So it also gives us that encouragement to go out there, do workshop sessions, also disseminate information through seminars as well, and also policy or interpret policy so that you can understand that issues of inclusion, intersectionality, our constitution that is transformation, it is very, very important to drive the work of gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Kokitso, for that indulgence. Now we are going to move to HOD Legal to give us some responses in terms of, I think there were questions on issues of CGE legal standing and other related legal matters, and he will then be responding on those concerns. You may actually take the floor, Tsietsi. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. I will start with the questions relating to what is the way forward for the CGE now. I think from the discussion, it's very clear that there is this lack of cooperation or unwillingness to willingly participate in this process of the commission. I think it's also became clear that despite the correspondence that was informing and requiring or requesting the departments and stakeholders who are duty bearers to be part of this engagement, that they failed to heed to that request. Clearly, it means that, as we said, the functions of our research department and education departments requires that willingness and deliberate actions to be taken. Therefore, as matters of last resort, then it means we definitely have to take into consideration the implementations of our recommendations in as far as the legal process is concerned at the end of the day. Clearly, if we call the duty bearers before the commission, you would have noted that the different issues were responded differently. There are different approaches to different issues. That is budget, different departments would cater or address it in a different way from the others, as well as the issue of where these gender focal persons are to be placed also. There's different approaches in that regard. And it's then important for the Commission to obtain such information at the end of the day under oath, so that also accountability in as far as the failing to comply with the recommendations of the Commission and its recommendations, as well as the evidence under oath, can then be used in future engagements in addressing this non-cooperation that we are seeing. Yes, the CGE, when it's taking its recommendations, we consider them to be binding, despite the recent court judgment that the CGE would still take into appeal at the Constitutional Court to reinforce the binding powers of the Chapter 9 institutions. Those are some of the challenges that we are currently encountering, and we will pay respect to that process until there is confirmation that the institutions must be compelled at the end of the day to comply with the recommendations of the Commission. And what is good about that, despite the binding nature of the recommendations themselves, accountability still stands, because with the notice that is issued by the CGE, the department must then respect the Commission, as opposed to what they did today without even appearing. Therefore, was there a need then to actually compel them in terms of a notice to call them for a policy dialogue? That is undesirable. But if it's the only means that we must be taking, then that is the way we would be going. To also address the aspect, I think Castro asked questions relating to the role of the fathers and the child care laws, the inconsistencies in its applications there. I think with that question, although it's not necessarily for this platform, if you could provide us maybe with your contact details so that we can reach you. I think the Commission is having strategic engagements on strategic litigation as well. You raised very important aspects that the Commission must look into. I think it may take us longer to obtain all that information, because part of what the Commission is doing is ensuring that it is taking different cases to courts, so that inconsistent legislations are challenged. Also, systemic issues are also addressed, be it through the legislation or through the courts. So therefore, the points that you raised, we would request that you submit them to the Commission so that we look into those aspects which needs to be addressed in line with the Commission's mandate. And I just wanted to be sure that I'm not leaving the other questions unanswered. I think the question of who exactly is responsible for gender focal persons, their capacitation and their empowerment and transformation, again, goes back to showing the country's slow pace of addressing legislation. compliance doesn't only come through the Commission's engagement. Compliance is a requirement as well through other departments like the Department of Employment and Labor, whereby the departments should then be adhering to employment equity legislation in ensuring that transformation takes place. Now you can see clearly that these initiatives and legislative requirements are not being complied with. And that is now in addition to the Commission's engagement and through advocating its mandate that we need to take the steps within our limitations. However, also other departments should also be coming into the game, like the Department of Employment and Labor, in as far as they also under the obligation to ensure that transformation takes place within the workspace. And these are some of the Commission will be taking some of these activities or strategic engagement with different stakeholders in addressing this as well, because this functions also lies within their mandate as well. Therefore, collaboration continues to be an important step that we need to be taking. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD Legal. I think we are now coming to almost at the end of our program, but as we can see, colleagues, that we are supposed to be getting a way forward, and also I think a summary of some of critical things that we might have omitted in our responses. So Dr. Matotoka has an opportunity to actually speak on those, and in light of that, colleagues, I would like us to, as a way of just waking ourselves up, put our hands together for Dr. Matotoka as he will be giving us a way forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, HOD, and good afternoon to everyone. It is often said, colleagues, that we have a progressive constitution. And it is said so because it's unique in the sense that when you look at one of the grounds under Section 9, specifically states gender is one of those that cannot be permitted, that you are discriminated on. But we cannot be all cat and no kettle when it comes to the actual achievement of gender equality in South Africa. It requires a concerted effort by the role players, particularly the accounting officers, so that there can be a progressive realization of gender equality. So we recently held a conference on the state of gender equality. And one of the things that was said, or rather recommendation, was that gender equality needs to be legislated. This was said against the backdrop of the lack of transformation that we are seeing in the country. So our report is clear in terms of the challenges pertaining to GFPs. We have outlined what needs to be done for us to address, that existing gap. But it would seem that to date nothing is done as per the report. Then the cardinal question is, colleagues, when we look at the framework itself, how enforceable is it? Or is it just one of those soft law frameworks that are nice to have in the country? Because if it is enforceable, the follow-up question would be, when we look at the performance contract of the HODs and the DGs, what is included there in terms of ensuring that they appoint GFPs in their respective offices? Then that's where we're going to get it right. So the fact that this framework itself, it's still having a lot of question in terms of its enforceability, it may answer why even today we don't have accounting officers with us to share their experiences, insights on how to improve the situation. And I agree with the colleagues, thus far it is important that they must account, but I was thinking about it a little bit different, that we cannot be going in circles in terms of holding people accountable. the reality is that at some point we held hearings. People are counted, people are committed, and things have not been done. And this is the public sector, and the head of state is responsible for that. So Section 15.2 is very clear of the CGE Act, that we must report to the president at least, is it what, twice a year, on issues pertaining to gender equality in the country. And I firmly believe that this must be one of those that we escalate, because in any event, we are planning that meeting with the president. And this issue must be escalated there, because the public sector is not coming to the party. And the reality of it is that when it comes to gender and gender equality broadly, it's often taking a backseat. It's not a priority, whether it's in the private or the public sector. It's not a priority. With the private sector, we keep on saying you must not appoint employment equity managers at lower levels. They must be at senior positions in terms of the Employment Equity Act. But we still see that there is non-compliance in that. And if they appoint them at senior levels, it is a ticking box exercise, because they are not faced or doing their day-to-day activities as GFPs or as employment equity managers. So it's a ticking box exercise. So at some point, it needs to come to an end where we say those that are in decision-making positions must be held accountable. And in this instance, I think because we are planning that meeting with the president, this must be one of those, Naledi, that is on the agenda, so that we can get a clear direction, from the president in terms of how we can really ensure that GFPs are really appointed in the right positions. If the view is that the framework is unenforceable, but this is clearly one of the best practices, because as one of the colleagues said, that is one of the mechanisms that they can influence, accounting officers or the institution to take position when it comes to gender. So let's move away from the framework itself, but it's a best practice that you must have somebody in a decision-making position to influence programs, budget, practices, policies, etc. So it's something that I think, colleagues, leaving from this meeting, it can be one of the best way forward, so that we don't find ourselves, spending resources to call all the accounting officers for something that it will end up being a dispute that this is not an enforceable framework. Let's rather escalate it to the presidency and also with the Minister of Women in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Matotoka. This is a very progressive way forward, that it can be that we are found to be making excuses if legislation is very clear in terms of what needs to be done. And I think the way forward where you are referring to tabling certain concerns that CGE has to the executive arm of government is a very progressive recommendation and a way forward. With that said, colleagues, we are, as I said earlier, that we are almost at the end of our program, and before we depart, as we were welcomed in the morning, I think it is really befitting that we must really be thanked for spending these ±4 hours engaging on the research study. And in light of that, I'm going to be calling forward Mr. Rabura Litsimo, the manager in the CEO's office, to do the closure for us, as I'm indicating that we were really welcomed in the morning. And it is really befitting that before we depart, we must get someone to actually do the closure and give us a way forward. Thank you. And Mr. Raletsimo, you may take the floor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Chairperson, CEO, and colleagues online. That includes even our external stakeholders. I think my responsibility is short and easy, which is just to thank everybody for your meaningful inputs. As one of the presenters said, some of the constructive criticism that we accept as the Commission. But I think overall, The contributions were very encouraging and building. And on that note, thank you very much for your participation in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I think we can do better than that. And I believe that even our stakeholders online, just to see if you are still alive, colleagues, we would really like to see your hands, bouncing, so that we can just get the comfort that the session was very informative, that it was useful. And that it is really providing a way forward to all of us in terms of what is it that we are supposed to be doing as critical gender missionaries who are sitting here. We are very clear in terms of if you are actually requiring some kind of capacitation, you have concerns, what is it that you can do through our provincial offices, through our PI programs. If you have concerns over what we've done, our lines are open to engage us even further through the research department, to the legal department, through the public education and information department. We are mandated to be at the center of ensuring that gender equality is promoted, that it is advanced, and that it is promoted. In light of that, colleagues, I'm gonna be actually proposing that we close this session. It's been very fruitful, very engaging. You've given us some insights in terms of what is it that we would need to look differently, because you've actually shared some insights we necessarily didn't have when we started this session. And from that, colleagues, I am going to ask that we adjourn this meeting. We will be sharing the pack that we've actually shared today. It will be emailed to everyone else who has participated here. We will even extend this further and share the presentations and the reports to other stakeholders who could not and actually join the chat and join us on these socials today. In light of that, colleagues, I am going to ask that we adjourn the meeting, and thank you for your time.